Imagine finding a Halloween costume buried for almost 3 decades, preserved perfectly like a time capsule that held not just memories of a night that should have been magical, but also the evidence that would finally reveal the truth about the most disturbing disappearance in Salem, Oregon's history. In March of 2022, construction workers building a new shopping center made a discovery that stopped the entire city. 3 meters underground, wrapped in plastic and preserved by Oregon's sandy soil, was a small pink princess dress with golden details, the costume that 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez was wearing when she disappeared on Halloween night of 1994. If you're watching this video, please subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. What you're about to discover will show how a night that should have been about fun and candy transformed into a nightmare that haunted a family and community for almost 3 decades. This is not just a story about a tragic disappearance. It's a story about how evil can hide behind familiar faces, about how an entire community changed its traditions to protect its children, and about how a small princess costume, buried by a monster, eventually became the key to his own condemnation. Emma Rodriguez went out to trick-or-treat on the night of October 31st, 1994, radiant in her favorite pink costume, dreaming of bags full of candy and stories to tell at school on Monday. She never came home. But her costume, preserved as silent evidence for 28 years, would finally give voice to the truth that her family desperately needed to hear. Emma Rodriguez possessed that kind of contagious joy that transformed any room into a brighter place simply through her presence. At 7 years old in October of 1994, she was a small girl for her age, standing 1 meter and 15 centimeters tall, with dark brown hair always tied in ponytails, with colorful, elastic bands, expressive brown eyes that sparkled especially when she smiled, and inexhaustible energy that kept her family constantly moving. But what truly defined Emma was not her adorable appearance. It was her ability to find magic in ordinary moments and her absolute passion for everything related to princesses, fairies, and fairy tale stories. Emma was the youngest child of the Rodriguez family, an immigrant Mexican family that had built a solid and loving life in Salem, Oregon. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, had moved to the United States in 1985, seeking better opportunities for their children. Carlos worked as a supervisor at a food processing plant, while Maria took care of the house and worked part-time as an assistant at a local daycare. Diego Rodriguez, 12 years old, was Emma's older brother and self-proclaimed protector. Although he occasionally got irritated with his younger sister's tireless energy, Diego genuinely adored Emma and took his role as responsible big brother very seriously. Emma followed Diego everywhere, Maria remembered with tears in her eyes. She wanted to do everything he did, go where he went. And Diego, even though he complained sometimes, always took care of her. They were best friends. Emma's personality was a charming mixture of childish sweetness and impressive determination. She had strong opinions about her clothes, preference for dresses with lots of sparkle. Her food, macaroni and cheese, was the absolute favorite. And her activities, anything involving art, music, or drama. At Lincoln Elementary School, Emma was beloved by both teachers and classmates. Her second-grade teacher, Mrs. Thompson, frequently commented on how Emma had a natural talent for making other children feel included, especially those who were shy or new to school. Emma had this special ability to make everyone around her happy, Mrs. Thompson remembered. If a child was crying, Emma would be the first to offer a hug. If someone was eating alone at lunch, Emma would invite that person to sit with her. She was just pure light. Emma loved art and spent hours drawing elaborate stories about princesses who saved kingdoms, fairies who helped lost animals, and magical adventures in distant lands. Her artistic creations covered the walls of the room she shared with Diego, transforming the space into a colorful gallery of childhood imagination. Music was another passion of Emma's. She sang constantly, during household chores, playtime, and especially during car rides with the family. Maria often joked that Emma came into the world singing, and that she knew more songs than the radio. But if there was something Emma loved more than princesses and music, it was Halloween. For her, Halloween was not just about candy, although she certainly appreciated that too. It was about magical transformation, about becoming someone different for one night, about living inside a fairy tale story. Since September of 1994, Emma had been obsessively planning her Halloween costume. She wanted to be a princess, but not just any princess. She wanted to be a special princess that she had created in her imagination, with a pink dress that sparkled like stars and a crown that made every child want to be her friend. Maria had spent weeks carefully sewing the perfect costume for Emma. A pink dress with layers of tulle, handmade golden details, and small rhinestones that actually sparkled when light hit them. The crown was a work of art in itself, a golden tiara decorated with small fabric flowers and fake pearls. Emma tried on the costume every day for 2 weeks before Halloween, Carlos remembered, smiling through tears. She would parade around the house, making curtsies, practicing how a real princess should walk. We took hundreds of photos of her in that costume. At school, Emma had talked about her costume to anyone who would listen. She had drawn portraits of herself as Princess Emma and created elaborate stories about the adventures her character would have. Emma was more excited about Halloween 1994 than about her own birthday, Diego remembered. She would wake up talking about it and go to sleep planning exactly which houses we would visit for candy. The Rodriguez family had established Halloween traditions that Emma adored. Every afternoon of October 31st, Maria would prepare a special Halloween Eve. Snack, sandwiches cut into pumpkin shapes, orange juice in decorated cups, and gingerbread cookies shaped like ghosts. After the snack, Emma and Diego would dress in their costumes and pose for what became an annual family photo session. Carlos always took dozens of photos, capturing every detail of the costumes and especially his children's radiant smiles. The plan for Halloween 1994 was simple and safe. Emma and Diego would join a group of neighborhood children, all accompanied by parents, to trick-or-treat on the streets around their house on Elm Street. They would visit only houses they knew, stay in groups, and return home by 9 o'clock in the evening to sort their candy and watch a Halloween movie as a family. It was a safe neighborhood, Maria explained. We knew all the neighbors. Children played in the street during the day. There had never been problems. Halloween seemed like the most natural and safe thing in the world. On the morning of October 31st, 1994, Emma woke up before the alarm, running to her parents' room to announce that it was finally Halloween. She spent the entire day in a state of pure excitement, barely able to concentrate at school, counting the minutes until she could put on her princess costume and begin her Halloween adventure. During dinner, Emma barely touched her food, too excited to eat. She talked incessantly about what candy she hoped to receive, which houses had the best, decorations, and how she was going to share her favorite candy with Diego. At 5:30 in the afternoon, Emma dressed in her pink princess costume, with Maria helping her adjust every detail so it would be perfect. Carlos took what would become the last photos of Emma, a 7-year-old girl radiant with happiness, completely innocent of the dangers awaiting her in Salem's dark streets. She was absolutely brilliant in that costume, Carlos remembered, like her entire personality was captured in that pink dress. She was our little princess, and she knew it. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Emma left home for what should have been a magical Halloween night. She waved to her parents from the front door, her pink costume sparkling under the porch light, her laughter echoing through the street as she ran to join her friends. Emma Rodriguez never returned home, but that night she became forever the little princess that an entire family would spend decades searching for, and an entire community would never forget. Tuesday, October 31st, 1994. A night that began with the promise of candy and fun, but transformed into the most terrible nightmare the Rodriguez family could ever imagine. Halloween 1994 in Salem, Oregon, had been typical for the region, a cold but clear night, with temperatures around 8 degrees Celsius, starry sky, and a gentle breeze that made dry leaves dance through the streets. It was the kind of night children loved for trick-or-treating, and adults appreciated for its perfect seasonal atmosphere. The Rodriguez family's neighborhood on Elm Street was known as one of the safest and most family-friendly in Salem. Well-maintained houses lined tree-covered streets, neighbors knew each other by name, and children played freely in yards and sidewalks. It was exactly the type of community where parents felt comfortable allowing their children supervised freedom. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Emma Rodriguez left home dressed in her pink princess costume, practically vibrating with excitement. She joined a group of 8 neighborhood children, ages 6 to 12, accompanied by 4 adult parents who would take turns supervising the group during the night. The group included Diego Rodriguez, 12 years old, as one of the older children, responsible for helping to care for the younger ones. Sarah Thompson, 8 years old, Emma's best friend. Michael Davis, 9 years old, and his sister. Katie, 6 years old, and several other neighborhood children who had known each other since early childhood. Emma was absolutely radiant, remembered Jennifer Thompson, Sarah's mother and one of the adult supervisors that night. She couldn't stop spinning so everyone could see how her costume sparkled. She was so happy it was contagious. All the other children were smiling just from seeing her. The planned trick-or-treating route covered approximately 15 blocks in the neighborhood, including only houses that parents knew personally or that had established reputations as safe and family-friendly. The plan was to methodically visit each house, allow children to interact briefly with residents, and return home before 9 o'clock in the evening. During the first hour, everything proceeded perfectly. The group visited approximately 20 houses, with Emma frequently leading interactions. Her naturally extroverted personality and stunning costume made her an instant favorite among neighbors distributing candy. Emma was playing the princess role completely, Diego remembered. She made small curtsies to everyone who gave her candy, said, "Thank you very much," with that sweet voice she used when she was being especially polite. Everyone was falling in love with her. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the group had reached the halfway point of their route and was taking a break on Oak Street so children could examine their candy and regroup. Emma was especially enthusiastic because she had received several full-size chocolate bars, a rare treasure in the trick-or-treating world. It was during this break that a fateful decision was made. Mrs. Anderson, one of the adult supervisors, mentioned that she had forgotten her wallet at home and needed to go back quickly to get it, as she planned to buy hot chocolate for all the children later. It seemed so innocent at the time, Mrs. Anderson remembered with tears in her eyes years later. I lived only 2 blocks away. I thought I could run there and back in 10 minutes maximum. Jennifer Thompson agreed to temporarily supervise all children while Mrs. Anderson made her quick trip home. The group remained on Oak Street, technically in a safe and well-lit location, but now with only one adult supervising 9 children. At 7:15 in the evening, while Jennifer was helping 6-year-old Katie Davis adjust her fairy costume that was slipping, she noticed that some of the older children had spread out slightly around the block, exploring particularly elaborate Halloween decorations at various houses. "I could see all the children," Jennifer insisted during later interrogations. "They weren't far away, just spread along the same street." Emma was with Sarah, examining a fake cemetery decoration at the Miller's house. At 7:30 in the evening, Jennifer called all children to regroup, preparing to continue their route when Mrs. Anderson returned. One by one, children gathered around her, except Emma. "Emma," Jennifer called, looking toward the Miller's house where she had seen Emma and Sarah moments before. "Time to regroup." Sarah Thompson ran back to the group, but she was alone. "Where is Emma?" Jennifer asked, a first touch of concern coloring her voice. "She was with me a second ago," Sarah answered, confused. "I think she went to see the pumpkins at Mr. Williams's house." Jennifer quickly checked each child in the group. Diego was present. Sarah was present. Michael and Katie Davis were present. All children were accounted for, except Emma Rodriguez. "Emma!" Jennifer shouted, now with real panic in her voice. "Emma, where are you?" Diego immediately joined the search, running from house to house on Oak Street, checking behind decorations, under porches, anywhere a small child could be hidden or playing. At 7:35 in the evening, when 5 minutes of frantic searching didn't locate Emma, Jennifer made the decision to knock on the door of every house on Oak Street, asking if anyone had seen a girl in a pink princess costume. The response was universally the same. Yes, several people had seen Emma during the afternoon of trick-or-treating, but no one had seen her in the last 15 to 20 minutes. At 7:40 in the evening, Mrs. Anderson returned to find a scene of controlled chaos. Children crying, Jennifer panicking, and Diego running frantically through the streets shouting his sister's name. "Where could she have gone?" Mrs. Anderson asked, her own voice betraying growing terror. "I don't know," Jennifer replied, her hands shaking as she tried to remain calm for the other children. "She was here, and then she wasn't." At 7:45 in the evening, the decision was made to take all other children home and alert their parents about the situation. Jennifer and Mrs. Anderson went directly to the Rodriguez house to inform Maria and Carlos that Emma was missing. Maria's reaction was immediate and devastating. She collapsed on the living room floor, crying uncontrollably, while Carlos immediately called the police. "My baby!" Maria cried. "My little princess! Where is my Emma?" Salem Police's response to Emma Rodriguez's disappearance was immediate and massive. Within minutes of Carlos's call at 7:50 in the evening, multiple patrol cars were converging on the Elm Street neighborhood, and an informal Amber Alert had been activated throughout the city. Detective Stephen Clark, Saint-Oedi, 18-year veteran specializing in crimes involving children, assumed primary investigation responsibility. He had worked on several missing children cases, but never one where a child had literally disappeared from among a supervised group of other children in a residential neighborhood. Emma Rodriguez's case was unique from the first moment, Detective Clark explained years later. Most children disappear from home, schools, or places where they're alone. Emma disappeared from among 8 other children and adult supervisors. This suggested something very deliberate and very dangerous. The first priority was organizing an immediate area search. Within 30 minutes, more than 100 volunteers, Neighbors, school parents, church members from the Rodriguez family's congregation were systematically searching every yard, every alleyway, every space where a 7-year-old child could be hidden, injured, or trapped. The search continued all night. Helicopters with searchlights scoured rural areas around Salem. Search and rescue dogs covered local trails. Divers checked nearby ponds and streams. Every empty house, every abandoned building, every structure where a child could be, was meticulously examined. Emma Rodriguez had simply disappeared. While the physical search continued, investigators began meticulously interviewing every person who had been on Oak Street that night. Each child in the group was gently questioned. Each adult was questioned in detail. Each area resident was interviewed about what they had seen during the critical hours. What emerged was a disturbingly vague timeline. Emma had been seen by multiple people until approximately 7:25 in the evening, but no one specifically remembered seeing her after that time. She had literally disappeared during a 5 to 10-minute window when adult attention was briefly divided. The most frustrating thing was that there were so many people around, Jennifer Thompson explained during her interrogation. The street was full of children trick-or-treating, parents supervising, neighbors distributing candy. How could someone kidnap a child in the midst of all this activity? The second line of investigation focused on potential predators in the area. Salem, like many American cities in the 90s, maintained records of known sex offenders, and each person on that list was immediately located and questioned about their whereabouts on Halloween night. One suspect in particular drew initial attention. Robert Chen, a 45-year-old man who had been convicted of child sexual abuse in 1987 and lived only 6 blocks from Oak Street. Chen was brought in for questioning at 2 o'clock in the morning on November 1st. Chen initially claimed he had been home alone on Halloween night, watching television and avoiding trick-or-treaters. But when pressed, his story began to change, and he admitted to going out briefly to buy cigarettes, around 7:30 in the evening. Chen became our primary suspect quickly, Detective Clark admitted. He had history, opportunity, and his story didn't match. But when we pressed for specific details about Emma, he genuinely seemed not to know what we were talking about. Polygraph tests and 48 hours of intensive interrogation eventually indicated that Chen, while clearly a problematic individual, probably was not involved in Emma's disappearance. The third theory investigated was that Emma had gotten lost or suffered some kind of accident, perhaps falling into a storm drain, getting trapped somewhere, or being injured in a way that incapacitated her from calling for help. Search teams expanded their area to include every possible location where a small child could have gone. Sewer systems were explored, abandoned buildings were searched, and even local landfills were methodically investigated. But no trace of Emma was found. The fourth possibility, and the most terrifying for the community, was that Emma had been kidnapped by an unknown predator who had specifically planned to take advantage of Halloween's chaos and distraction to target a vulnerable child. Halloween created the perfect storm for a predator, criminal profiler Dr. Martinez explained. Children everywhere, distracted parents, strange people walking around in costumes, natural darkness. If someone wanted to kidnap a child, Halloween would be the ideal time. The investigation expanded to include analysis of every vehicle seen in the area during relevant hours, interviews with anyone who had been delivering food or conducting other business in the neighborhood, and even checking sex offenders from neighboring cities who might have traveled to Salem specifically for Halloween. The impact on the community was devastating and immediate. Parents throughout Salem kept their children home from school for days. Halloween traditions were canceled indefinitely. Oak Street, where Emma had disappeared, became like an impromptu shrine, with neighbors leaving flowers, stuffed animals, and pictures of Emma. Emma's disappearance changed our city forever, explained Salem's mayor at the time. Parents never again felt completely safe, letting their children out of sight. Halloween went from being a celebration to being a source of anxiety for every family with young children. For 12-year-old Diego Rodriguez, the guilt was overwhelming and persistent. As the big brother, who was supposed to take care of Emma, he felt personally responsible for her disappearance. Diego stopped eating, stopped sleeping properly, Maria Rodriguez remembered. He kept saying it was his fault, that he should have been watching Emma more closely. A 12-year-old boy shouldn't have to carry that kind of weight. In December of 1994, 2 months after the disappearance, active investigation was scaled back. Hundreds of leads had been followed. Thousands of hours had been devoted to the case, and more than $200,000 in resources had been spent. But Emma Rodriguez remained missing, and there were no viable suspects or evidence to pursue. The case was reclassified as cold, but remained officially open. Emma's picture joined the growing collection of missing children that haunted police stations across America, a constant reminder that sometimes children simply vanish into darkness and never return home. The last confirmed sighting of Emma Rodriguez had been at 7:25 in the evening on Oak Street, where a neighbor remembered seeing a small girl in a pink princess costume examining Halloween decorations. After that moment, Emma had disappeared into what seemed like thin air, leaving behind only a family destroyed by grief, and a community forever changed by the knowledge that evil could strike anywhere, anytime, even in the midst of what should have been innocent childhood joy. The 28 years that followed Emma Rodriguez's disappearance were an excruciating journey through grief without closure, hope that gradually transformed into despair, and the slow acceptance that some questions might never have answers. Maria Rodriguez never completely recovered from Emma's loss. In the first years after the disappearance, she kept Emma's room exactly as it was on Halloween night, toys scattered where Emma had left them, clothes in the closet waiting for her return, drawings of princesses still hanging on the walls. Mom used to sit in Emma's room every night, Diego remembered, now a 40-year-old man. She would hold Emma's stuffed animals and sing the lullabies she used to sing to her. It was heartbreaking to watch. Carlos Rodriguez dealt with the loss by immersing himself in work and obsessive searching for answers. He corresponded with private investigators, followed every possible lead, and spent thousands of dollars the family couldn't afford on psychics, search teams, and anyone who claimed they could help find Emma. Dad never stopped looking, Diego observed. Even when police officially moved the case to cold status, Dad continued making phone calls, checking websites for missing children, following up on every rumor or sighting. His entire life became about finding Emma. Diego grew up carrying guilt that would shape his entire adult life. As the big brother who was supposed to protect Emma, he felt personally responsible for her disappearance. This overwhelming sense of responsibility led him to a career in law enforcement, where he specialized in missing children cases. "I became a cop to find my sister," Diego admitted years later, "but also to make sure other families wouldn't have to go through what we went through. Every missing child case I worked became personal, because I could see my own family's pain in the faces of the parents." The Salem community also struggled to process the trauma of Emma's disappearance. Halloween traditions throughout the city were permanently altered. Many neighborhoods implemented mandatory adult supervision rules, earlier curfews, and background checks for anyone wanting to participate in community Halloween events. Emma's case changed how we think about child safety forever, explained Dr. Sarah Wilson, a child psychologist who worked with multiple families affected by the case. It shattered a certain innocence that parents had about letting their children have unsupervised freedom, even in familiar neighborhoods. Lincoln Elementary School, where Emma had been a beloved second grader, created a memorial garden in her honor. Every year on her birthday, students and teachers would plant flowers and read stories about princesses and fairy tales that Emma had loved. The garden became a place where people could go to remember her and find some peace. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, technology advances periodically renewed hope for solving Emma's case. DNA databases expanded, facial recognition software improved, and social media created new ways to spread information about missing children. In 2005, an age-progressed photo showing what Emma might look like at 18 was widely circulated. In 2012, another progression showed her potential appearance at 25. Each new image generated hundreds of tips and sightings, but none led to concrete evidence. Every few years, we'd get a surge of renewed interest, explained Detective Martinez, who had taken over the cold case from Detective Clark. Someone would see an age progression photo and think they recognized Emma. We'd follow up on every single tip, but they all led to dead ends. One particularly painful false alarm occurred in 2018 when a young woman in Portland claimed to be Emma Rodriguez. She had some basic knowledge about the case that she could have obtained from news reports, and her physical appearance was plausibly similar to what Emma might look like as an adult. For 48 hours, we thought maybe it was really her, Maria Rodriguez remembered. We drove to Portland immediately, our hearts racing with hope. But when we met this woman, I knew within seconds that she wasn't my Emma. A mother knows. DNA testing confirmed that the woman was not Emma, adding another layer of disappointment to a family that had endured decades of false hopes and crushed dreams. As years passed, different theories about what happened to Emma continued to circulate throughout Salem. Some people believed she had been kidnapped by child traffickers and taken far away from Oregon. Others thought she might have been murdered locally and her body hidden somewhere that had never been searched. A persistent theory was that Emma had been taken by someone she knew, maybe a neighbor, family friend, or community member who had gained her trust enough to convince her to go with them voluntarily. This theory was particularly disturbing because it suggested that her kidnapper might have been hiding in plain sight within a community that had spent years searching for her. The most terrifying possibility was that whoever took Emma was someone we all knew, explained Jennifer Thompson, who never forgave herself for losing track of Emma during that fateful Halloween night. Someone we trusted, someone we saw regularly, someone who helped search for her while knowing exactly where she was. During these decades of uncertainty, the Edouard Rodriguez family struggled to maintain some semblance of normal life. Carlos eventually had to stop his obsessive searching because it was destroying his health and their finances. Maria slowly began to pack away some of Emma's belongings, though she never could bring herself to completely clear out her daughter's room. "We had to learn how to live with a hole in our family," Diego explained. "We couldn't bring Emma back by destroying ourselves with grief. But we also couldn't simply move on as if she had never existed." In 2015, Diego married Sarah Chen, a fellow police officer who understood his dedication to missing children cases. Their first child, a daughter born in 2017, was named Emma Grace Rodriguez, ensuring that Emma's memory would live on in a new generation. "When our daughter was born, it was both joyful and heartbreaking," Diego said. "Joyful because we were giving life to a new little girl, heartbreaking because my parents would never have that experience with their first Emma. As the 2020s began, the Rodriguez family had largely accepted that they might never know what happened to Emma. They maintained hope, but it was a quieter, less desperate kind of hope than had consumed them in earlier years. But in March of 2022, construction crews breaking ground for a new shopping center in what had once been an undeveloped area of Salem made a discovery that would finally answer questions that had haunted a family and community for nearly 3 decades. March 15, 2022. Construction crews from Pacific Northwest Development were excavating the foundation for Salem's newest shopping center when they made a discovery that would reopen a case that had remained cold for almost 3 decades. The development site was located approximately 2 miles from where Emma Rodriguez had disappeared in 1994. At that time, it had been a heavily wooded area that was occasionally used by hunters and hikers, but was generally considered too remote for most recreational activities. We were digging foundation trenches when one of our excavator operators noticed something unusual, explained site foreman Jake Morrison. He'd hit a patch of soil that looked like it had been disturbed previously. Different color, different consistency than the surrounding earth. When more careful excavation revealed plastic sheeting approximately 3 meters underground, the crew immediately stopped work and contacted authorities. What they found when police carefully examined the site would finally provide answers that the Rodriguez family had desperately needed for 28 years. Wrapped in multiple layers of plastic and preserved by Oregon's damp, acidic soil was a small pink dress with gold trim and sequins. Unmistakably, the princess costume that Emma Rodriguez had been wearing when she disappeared on Halloween night, 1994. When I saw that dress being carefully lifted from the ground, I knew immediately what we had found, said Detective Martinez, who had worked the Emma Rodriguez cold case for more than a decade. It was simultaneously a moment of victory, finally having a breakthrough, and a moment of profound sadness, knowing that we were about to shatter a family's remaining hopes. The dress was remarkably well preserved. The plastic wrapping had protected it from decomposition, and soil conditions had acted like a natural preservative. More importantly for investigators, the fabric contained DNA evidence that had remained viable after almost 3 decades underground. But the dress was not alone in its underground hiding place. Buried with it were other items that painted a horrifying picture of what had happened to Emma Rodriguez. Scraps of what appeared to be duct tape, pieces of rope, and a small plastic bag containing jewelry that Maria Rodriguez would later identify as a bracelet she had given Emma for her 7th birthday. Most significantly, there were DNA traces on multiple items that did not belong to Emma, evidence that would finally identify her killer. Preserving evidence underground for that long was extremely unusual, explained forensic specialist Dr. Sarah Thompson. Most biological evidence degrades significantly after just a few years, but the specific soil conditions at this site, combined with the plastic wrapping, created a near-perfect preservation environment. Within hours of the discovery, DNA evidence was being processed through national databases. By the next morning, investigators had a match that shocked everyone involved in the case. The DNA belonged to Robert Harrison, a man who had lived just 4 blocks from where Emma disappeared in 1994. Harrison had been among hundreds of people interviewed during the original investigation, but had been ruled out as a suspect because he had no prior criminal history and had presented as a helpful, concerned neighbor during the initial chaos of Emma's disappearance. Harrison was hiding in plain sight, Detective Martinez explained. He was one of those people everyone trusted, friendly neighbor, helpful during community events, always ready to volunteer for neighborhood watch activities. No one suspected he was capable of something so evil. Further investigation revealed that Harrison had maintained a carefully constructed facade for decades. He had moved away from Salem in 1995, just months after Emma's disappearance, claiming job opportunities elsewhere. Since then, he had lived in multiple states under his real name, never attracting suspicion or engaging in any behavior that would bring him to police attention. He was what criminologists call a one-time offender, explained criminal profiler Dr. James Wilson. Someone who commits a single terrible crime and then manages to control themselves afterward. These cases are incredibly difficult to solve because there's no pattern of behavior for investigators to follow. When authorities located Harrison in 2022, he was 78 years old and living in a retirement community in Arizona. Faced with irrefutable DNA evidence, he initially denied involvement, but eventually broke down and confessed to kidnapping and murdering Emma Rodriguez on Halloween night, 1994. Harrison's confession revealed a crime that was both opportunistic and deeply disturbing. He had been watching the group of children trick-or-treating in his neighborhood, specifically focusing on Emma because her elaborate princess costume and obvious joy made her stand out from other children. When he saw Emma briefly separated from the group while examining Halloween decorations, he approached her and told her that her parents had asked him to come get her, that there was a family emergency and she needed to come with him immediately. Emma trusted him because she recognized him as a neighbor, Detective Martinez explained. Children are taught to trust familiar adults, especially in emergency situations. Harrison exploited that natural trust in the most evil way possible. Harrison led Emma to his car, drove her to the remote wooded area that would later become the shopping center site, and murdered her when she began to cry and ask for her parents. He buried her body in a different location that he refused to reveal, but kept her dress and other items as what he called souvenirs of his crime. For 28 years, Harrison had lived with the knowledge of what he had done, while Emma's family suffered through decades of uncertainty and pain. His confession finally provided answers, but also revealed the devastating truth that their beloved Emma had been dead all along. The discovery of Emma's dress and the arrest of her killer brought both closure and renewed grief to the Rodriguez family. After almost 3 decades of hoping against hope that Emma might still be alive somewhere, they now knew that she had died just hours after disappearing from that Halloween group. Finally knowing what happened to Emma was both a relief and a devastation, Diego Rodriguez said. Relief because we finally had answers. Devastation because those answers meant that all our years of hoping and searching had been built on a false foundation. The remote burial site chosen by Harrison ensured that Emma's remains would likely never be recovered. A final cruelty that meant her family would never be able to give her a proper burial or have a physical place to mourn their loss. But the discovery of her princess dress, preserved underground like a time capsule of innocence destroyed, finally gave Emma Rodriguez a voice after 28 years of silence. The arrest of Robert Harrison in 2022 finally closed a case that had haunted Salem, Oregon for nearly 3 decades, but also revealed a truth more disturbing than many had imagined. During an extensive interrogation, Harrison confessed to kidnapping and murdering Emma Rodriguez, providing details that only her killer could know. He described her princess costume perfectly, knew about the specific bracelet she wore, and could recount her exact words when she realized she was in danger. Harrison's confession was both detailed and chilling, explained Detective Martinez. He showed no remorse for what he had done to Emma, only concern for himself and how the crime might affect his comfortable retirement. Harrison revealed that he had been planning to approach a child during Halloween 1994, specifically targeting the event because of its chaos and darkness. He had observed multiple children throughout the evening before deciding that Emma's isolation from her group and her trusting nature made her an ideal victim. Most disturbing was Harrison's admission that he had continued to live normally in Salem for months after Emma's murder, even participating in community search efforts and offering comfort to the Rodriguez family while knowing exactly what had happened to their daughter. "He would bring casseroles to our house," Maria Rodriguez said, her voice trembling. "He would ask about our search efforts and offer to help distribute flyers, all while knowing that our little girl was dead because of what he had done." Harrison had chosen the remote burial location carefully, ensuring that Emma's body would never be found, while keeping her dress and personal items as trophies. His decision to move away from Salem in 1995 was motivated by fear that continued investigation might eventually expose his crime. For 28 years, Harrison lived a comfortable life, while the Rodriguez family suffered. He married, had children and grandchildren, and maintained an image as a caring grandfather and respectable retiree, all while harboring the secret of one of Salem's most heinous crimes. Learning about his normal life after Emma's murder was perhaps the most painful part, Diego Rodriguez observed. "While we were destroyed by grief, he was building a happy family. While we were searching desperately for answers, he was enjoying a peaceful retirement." Harrison was charged with first-degree murder, but due to his advanced age and declining health, he died in prison before his trial could begin. His death meant that many questions about Emma's final hours would remain forever unanswered. Today, the Rodriguez family has finally found some measure of peace. Emma's princess dress has been returned to them and now rests in a special memorial they created in their home. Diego continues his work helping other families of missing children, using Emma's case as motivation to never give up hope. Salem's Halloween traditions have slowly returned to normal, though the community never forgot the little princess who vanished on that terrible night in 1994. Emma Rodriguez's memory lives on as a reminder that evil can hide behind familiar faces, but also that love and determination can eventually bring truth to light, even after decades of darkness.